And now, as we begin our wrap up, I want to talk about diversifying the curriculum. As I stated at the outset, I'm a professor of literature. I teach literature. You also should know that when someone will allow me to do so, and let me on their stage or in front of their camera, I'm an actor, an on-camera actor and theater actor, and a commercial print model. And so, and that experience, I should tell you, I started this late in life, but it just connects so perfectly and wonderfully with what I teach. You're talking about that dead text, as I learned and trained myself and began to get on stage, everything came together. So not only am I talking about the text as a blueprint or a literary work, but I'm also getting experience and can talk about it from the practical side. But what I want to talk about today, because some of you had asked about finding um, a material. In every fall, I teach a course for first semester freshmen, and it's titled Introduction to African American Dramatic Literature. Now, I do so for a couple of reasons, for two reasons, and I'm not going to read that because you can have access to it, the file, the slides later. But I do so for two reasons. One, and that is to ensure that first semester freshmen are taught by a professor and not a TA or an instructor. But more importantly, we have a university-wide ethnic studies requirement. Every undergraduate must take at least one course in ethnic studies before they graduate. And that requirement was instituted in 1989 in response to a lot of racist incidents that were happening on our campus. I am in the University of Wisconsin-Madison. In Madison, Wisconsin, we have over 40,000 students, and about 15 or 1,600 of them are African American, and that's across the university. The most of these students then who come to this class, and remember, they're coming to complete the ethnic studies requirement. Next slide, please. Are white. And many of them are from these small Wisconsin towns, and they have no background in African American history or culture beyond that which is celebrity driven, what they see on TV. You know, it's really interesting that in the 21st century, we still have people who would tell me in my classrooms, "You're the first Black person I've ever met." Okay, that's the reality. That's where I live. So anyway, I'm in Wisconsin. I can't do anything about geography, and I love it here. The course outcomes. Then these are the outcomes. You take a look. They have to, and this really ties back to what we're all saying about the importance of research, whether you are teaching dramatic literature or literature generally, or preparing that table work for preparing to do the work of acting. So among the things that the students have to do is write a plot summary. They also have to write a review of a theater performance. Now, there's very little Black theater and almost no Black theater in Madison, Wisconsin. And right now we don't have much theater, period, aside of community theater, because we have only one small professional theater group, which is one of the reasons I was going back to digital theater. And in fact, one of my students, that was in 2019, I looked back at my records. And even though the container, which they watched and had to write a review of, does not deal with African Americans, it's about immigration. It resonates with everyone now, with us in the United States, certainly. And the other point was that they had to look at design. They had to look at acting. The lighting of that show, for example, is phenomenal. I mean, it's filmed in a shipping container. And so among the other things that they had to do was create a short script, monologue, and then write a 5-page paper. Next slide, please. This is the required reading. Now, as I said, I've taught this course for over 10 years every fall, but for this semester, and one of the things I do is I change up the plays every semester. Otherwise, I'd just be bored out of my mind. But because I was trying to figure out how to capture the moment that we are in now for fall. 2020. I reset this this required reading list. I started with Pipeline. Now they did not read Pipeline; they watched the video. And this is the filmed version of the Lincoln Center production of Pipeline, which is on digital theater. And then we had discussions around this. Now remember that I'm dealing with first semester freshmen, so they could talk about their own high school experiences and this whole idea of the school to prison pipeline. Some of the other things that we dealt with, I usually start with the raisin in the sun, but again, because of the time that we were in, and I think that it's time for me to really, as I work through this course, start at the beginning with something that connects with the students directly and their experiences. Now, a couple of other things that I wanted to point out. There is a play here you see, Passover by Antoinette Nwandu. That was the second play. Now, they read that play, and it has some really strong language in it. In fact, this was the first time I had to put a trigger warning on my syllabus to say, there's some language that people might find offensive here. But the question for the students was, why did the playwrights use this kind of language? And when we go into Q&A, which we're going to do in just a couple of minutes, I do want to ask our panelist, Sherelle, particularly, to talk about the issue of the language and the use of specifically of the N-word in the rehearsal space, in the studio space, and so forth. In terms of looking for work for plays to produce, it depends. Again, first of all, with Passover, you really need to hire a Black director for that. But if you look at Susan Laurie Parks' Venus, this is a play by that is based on the life of a woman named Sarji Bartman, the so-called Hottentot Venus, who was from South Africa. She was brought to London at a time when the British apparently just loved freak shows, and she was presented as a freak show, because of her big behind. And there's much about scientific racism that you can include in that discussion of Susan Laurie Parks' Venus. There are articles about the work itself and what is scientific racism and how did it specifically relate to her. Another play, The Mojo and the Say So, that is set. It is based loosely on the police shooting of a young man named Clifford Glover in New York, in Brooklyn, in I think it was 1976 or 78. It's a very abstract play, and for those of you who are looking to produce something that requires you use your technical people, this would be a dream, because in the middle of the character's living room, there's this four character play. You have a big old car that the father is working on continuously as he and his wife try to avoid discussing what happened the night of the child was killed. And also there is a wrongful death check that has been just sent out. Think about that. It resonates right now with what's happening regarding the payment for the death of George Floyd. And you have a character who's a preacher, who's a vulture. He's preying on the family, especially the mother, and he turns into a vulture at the end. So how are you going to work with that? Okay, so those are a couple of things. I want to point out one more thing that I included, and that's Smart People by Lydia Diamond. You have in that a white man who's trying to prove that all white people are racist. It's quite a story. I had happened to see a production of that at Writers Theater in Glencoe, which Kathy Perkins lit. It was just fabulous. Now I want to stop here and just say as a wrap up, because we really want to hear your questions, that first of all, thank our presenters for sharing our talent expertise and research with you. And what we have done in the short span of this webinar is provided you with a wealth of resources, the result of our hard work. And this is years of work as scholars, researchers, artists that are committed to Black theater and to inclusivity. That's at the center of all of what we do across the theater and the performing arts. And I want to say also many thanks. Thank you to Talia Rogers and Digital Theater Plus for making this webinar possible.